maybe the first thing that I'll say is that while one of the things that the primary focus I have in the art world right now is as the director of LACE, my background is it is through arts training, and in fact, even when I was in grad school in a sculpture program, I found myself a whole lot more interested in working with people, and didn't have quite the structure that I think is beginning to exist now that can define this interest in still being very much a part of the art world. I think that that's one of the critical things that makes it both interesting but also challenging, is that being interested in social issues and the transformation not only of culture but of society, and how we can do that as artists is, to me, some of the fundamental underpinnings of what defines a social practice.
Would you give us some concrete examples that you've intersected with recently?
Absolutely. So in terms of concrete examples of what I define as social practice, one of the most clear and concrete is a project that Lace worked on with the artist Suzanne Lacey called 3 Weeks in January. And what it was focusing on is looking at the reality of sexual assault and rape in our culture, and specifically in Los Angeles. So the piece had multiple components. As the name describes, it took place over a 3-week period of time in January 2012. It included, as sort of its signature anchor image, a large map of Los Angeles that was installed on the front of Deaton Auditorium at the Los Angeles Police Department, which was literally right across from City Hall. Every day, one of the team members would get reports from the day before from the police department of who had reported a rape. And then we would stencil onto the map those general locations. So it was a really beautiful and actually very intense visual mapping, data mapping of the reality of sexual assault and who was willing to share that it had happened. At the same time, the project also included a series of performances and meetups. Some happened in art spaces like Lace. We hosted an event. Others happened in non-art spaces like high schools and social service centers. And then the idea was to really help generate dialogue and sharing about how rape impacts our lives. There was also a social media component that included a Twitter campaign where we were asking people not to identify whether they themselves had been attacked, but if rape had touched their lives. Tweeting, "I know someone, do you?"
Right.
And of course, that someone could be themselves, or it could be someone else. Right. There's a lot of parts to that project, but I think that gives a general idea of both the work that was done to really create things that the art world can understand, like the big public art mural, LA Rape Map was, but then also the other pieces that are very much a part of what social practice can do, which is bringing people into the project and into the conversation who don't necessarily identify as artists within a visual arts or even performing arts strict paradigm, but find themselves moved by the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. What do you see as some of the main challenges, both for social practitioners, artists, and social practitioners, space directors like you?
Well, challenges and opportunities are very closely. The things that I'm going to talk about are both things that make it very difficult, but on the other hand, when you can figure out ways to do the work, it's really quite exceptional what can happen. So one of the first things that we've already touched upon is social practice, socially engaged art is looking to make a difference and connect with a broader cultural sphere, but it's also very conscious of and interested in having a dialogue with the art world. And yet the language and the ways that these projects often express themselves don't fit nicely into the way people know what art is. And that is very much a reality. The other part of that, which is connected but separate, is the amount of time it takes. And perhaps another way of thinking about it is with a more studio-based practice. Actually, there are many, many artists working in more traditional forms that literally take years to create their work. But in terms of what the public sees, the presentation period can actually be quite rapid. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that people focus on more often than not. Whereas with social practices, one of the things that happens is because you are already engaging in a public environment, but it takes a long time, the patience and the kind of stamina required, especially for those that are funding these projects, is often really quite challenging. Yeah. So one of the artists that I love to follow and am constantly learning from is a Dutch artist, Jana van Heeswijk, and she refers to her works as long scale rather than large scale. And when she shared that, I thought, wow, that is a really important idea to grab onto, but also to share, because the challenge of thinking, I want to make a difference, and I'm going to do it in 6 weeks or a year. The truth of the matter is these kinds of practices and projects, even knowing what you've done with 3 weeks in January, that project, its public iteration happened in 3 weeks. Its continued impact has only just begun.